I interrupted him this afternoon and caught him Skyping with his wife. He's an amazing husband, and he has a little girl named Maya, for whom he is an amazing father. He's all those things, and it's such a privilege to have Sundar here from Virginia. Dr. Sundar Cook, would you come and teach us tonight?
Thanks, buddy. Thanks. Good evening. It's good to be back here with you. There are two very important people who are not with me. That's Meg and Maya. But they send their love, and they wanted me to bring this picture, which is coming up very soon. Oh, it's up. Good. Meg, Maya, and President Washington. All three of them are saying hi from the East Coast. They wish they could be here, but they can't. Okay, I'm going to jump into this so that we're not here all night. Why do we seek counseling, whether it's pastoral counseling or psychological counseling? Why do we seek counseling? My experience has taught me that we seek counseling because we want to clear our head of some mental anguish. And the most common mental anguish in the United States is anxiety. And if you're breathing, if you're a living human being, then you know what anxiety feels like. You know what it feels like. And right beside anxiety is anger. Most relational problems, those problems are associated with some form of anger. One person is angry at the other, or both are angry at each other, and they're fed up, and they just need help. So how do you clear your head of anxiety and anger, particularly when everything you've tried doesn't work? What do you do then? What do you do next? That's what I want to talk to you about. Let's clear our head of that kind of stuff so that we have space for the good things in life. So that's what I want to talk about. I think God has given us a path that we can take, that if we go down that path, we can clear our head of some of this junk. So I have two objectives. One, I want to talk to us about how to turn anxiety into love. Then I want to talk to you about how to turn anger into a guardian of your relationship. Those two things. Anxiety. The first psychological symptom recorded in the Bible is anxiety. Immediately after the fall, Adam and Eve go into hiding. And God comes walking through the garden. He says, "Where are you?" And Adam's response, "Well, I heard you in the garden, and I felt afraid." And you have the manifestation of the first psychological symptom. And from that point on, God has worked hard. He has worked hard to encourage us, to comfort us, to reassure us, not to be overwhelmed by anxiety. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Joshua, the prophets, God encouraged them not to be anxious. Jesus encouraged the disciples not to be afraid. Peter and Paul encouraged their churches not to be anxious. Mary goes into the empty tomb, and there's an angel there. What's the first thing out of the angel's mouth? Do not be afraid, fear not. See, you don't have to be a psychologist to come to the conclusion that we are easily overwhelmed by anxiety. We are easily overwhelmed by anxiety. And God does not want that for us. He doesn't. However, I don't think He wants us to live a life without anxiety. He doesn't want us to live an anxiety-free life because there is a right dose of anxiety that is actually good for you. If you haven't felt anxiety in a long time, then that means you've been in your comfort zone too long. And if you've been in your comfort zone for a long time, then that means you're stuck and you're not growing. Because the only way to grow is to get outside of your comfort zone, right? But what do you feel the moment you step out of your comfort zone? Anxiety. See, but in order to grow, you have to stretch yourself and you have to take on new experiences, and that will provoke anxiety. So there's a right dose of anxiety that's part of growth. There's also a certain level of anxiety that is a part of intimacy. See, intimacy is the knowing of one another, and as intimacy deepens, we begin to know each other at a deeper level, and we begin to share deeper parts of ourselves. We begin to share the parts of ourselves that we don't like, the parts of ourselves we're embarrassed of, the parts of ourselves that we're afraid will be judged. And when we share those parts of ourselves, we are taking a risk with the other person. We're taking a risk with them, and it can feel like we're stepping out on a ledge. But intimacy requires taking a risk, and it's called intimate risk-taking, and that's going to create some anxiety. So there's some level of anxiety that's part of intimacy in relationships. There's a certain level of anxiety that will boost our intellect and boost our performance. So the right dose of anxiety is good, but God does not want us to be overcome by anxiety and overwhelmed and dominated by anxiety. Why is that? Why is that? Well, it's this reason. Excessive anxiety ruins our experience of joy. So when we feel really, really anxious, we can't enjoy our life. We can't enjoy our family, our friends, our calling, our ministry. When we are really, really anxious, we are too miserable to enjoy life. And God does not want that for us. So I want to talk to you about how we can put anxiety in its place and how we can get it out of our head so that we can move on in life and with the good stuff. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is that anxiety brings something good out in you. That's the first thing. Anxiety brings something good out in you. Now, throughout this talk, I'm going to pepper in some neuroscience, just because I have the head. Now, researchers, they created an experiment, and there were two conditions. In one condition, it was the condition of fear. In the second condition, it was the condition of comfort. And in the condition of fear, they tried to activate the fear response in people, right? They tried to scare them. And so they showed them really scary images, images of dead bodies, images of people dying, images of snakes ready to strike them. And when they could activate the fear response, they then asked them, okay, as quickly as you can, name all the people that love and support you. We're going to give you 60 seconds. Go. And then the researchers recorded all the names. And then in the condition of comfort, they tried to show people images of people hugging and laughing and getting along and blue skies and sunshine. And when they were in a state of comfort, they said, okay, as quickly as you can, name all the people that love and support you. We're going to give you 60 seconds. Go. And they recorded all the names down. Then the researchers stepped back and they compared the two groups to find out who could recall the names faster. And really, recalling the names of loved ones was the very beginning stages of a larger process that involved turning to loved ones for comfort and support. So what they were looking for is which group could turn to loved ones for comfort and support faster. Was it the people who were afraid? Could they turn to loved ones faster? Or was it the people who were in a state of comfort? Did they turn to loved ones faster? Who do you think? Raise your hand if you think it was the people who were afraid. Yeah. Raise your hand if you think it's the people who were comfortable. Okay. Well, if you said afraid, you're right. The researchers showed that when we are afraid, we quickly move to loved ones for comfort and support. And so what they demonstrated is that anxiety creates a desire for relationship. See, anxiety, what it does is it initiates an internal process whereby we seek and find loved ones, and upon finding them, we draw near to them in order to feel safe and secure. Anxiety causes us to long for and desire the people in our lives that represent a safe haven and secure base. And that desire to move close to loved ones, that desire is something good inside of you, it's something good inside of me, and it's something good inside of us that is brought out by anxiety. So anxiety brings out something good in us, a longing for relationship. So this is what we know. This is what we know. In a situation of danger, that means a situation that activates the fear response, that gets us worried and restless. That situation can be external or internal. But when we are in a situation of danger, we are hardwired to ask some very basic questions about the availability of others. We're designed to ask, is there anybody there for me? Can I turn to anybody? If I call out to you, will you be there for me? If I reach out to you, will you be there? Can I rely on you? Can I count on you? We are designed to ask those questions. And if the answer is yes, can I rely on you? Yes. Will you be there for me? Yes. If the answer is yes, our internal world begins to change. We experience relief, reassurance, comfort. It's called contact comfort. When we make contact with somebody that loves us and cares for us, that contact generates a sense of comfort inside, and we call it contact comfort. Now, James Cohen out of the University of Virginia did a remarkable study with this. And he took individuals into his laboratory and then shocked them in the ankle to create some pain. Then he stuck them into an MRI machine and said, when you see this big red X light up, there's a 30% chance we're going to shock you. So they get into this MRI machine, and the red X lights up. 30% chance of a shock. They begin to anticipate pain. And what does that do? That causes us to get afraid. We get anxious because pain's coming. Now James looks at the brain. He's trying to find out, okay, what does the brain look like when we're anxious? And he finds that there's all kinds of brain activity. The brain is working really hard to deal with the anxiety and the fear. Then he creates a second condition. And this time he brings a friendly stranger into the room. And he says, I want you to hold the hand of this friendly stranger. So they're holding the hand of the friendly stranger. Big red X comes up, 30% chance of a shock. They begin to anticipate pain, feel anxious, feel afraid. James looks at the brain, and guess what? There's less brain activity. The brain isn't having to work as hard to deal with that stress and anxiety and that fear. Simply because the person is not alone. They've made contact with somebody. But it keeps going. He creates a third condition, and this time he brings the person's spouse into the room. We want you to hold the hand of your spouse. So they're holding the hand of the spouse. Big red X comes up, 30% chance of a shock. They anticipate pain, begin to feel worried and anxious, and he finds there's even less brain activity. The brain is not even having to work as hard to deal with that anxiety and that fear. And he demonstrates that relationship turns off the fear response. And the deeper the relationship, the more intimate the relationship is, the more it has the power to reduce that anxiety and that fear. Isn't that remarkable? Our relationships can impact us neurologically and changes our neurological response to anxiety and fear. But, let's say we go in the other direction. This time, the answer is no. Will you be there for me? No. Can I count on you? No. If I reach out to you, will you be there? No. If the answer is no, it's a game changer. Because if the answer is no, that means you're alone in the face of danger. You're alone with your anxiety and your worry. And what do you think that does to your internal world? God has already told us it's not good to be alone. And what it does is it causes us to lose control of our emotional life and our internal world. And the anxiety begins to increase. It begins to mount. And it becomes more intense. And it becomes chronic. Or it goes in the opposite direction. And we shut the anxiety down. And we cut it off from our experience. And we pretend like we have it all together. We pretend like we're invincible and unflappable. And we give up on people and we give up on relationships. What's the point? The answer is no. And so then we become completely self-reliant and compulsively self-reliant. And researchers have taken people who use this defensive maneuver and they've brought them into the laboratory and assessed for physiological signs of anxiety. And guess what they find? Massive, massive amounts of anxiety. So the bottom line is, if the answer is no, if we are alone, we are going to experience enormous anxiety whether we look like it or not. So what do we do with this information? What do we do with this? Well, we must create situations where the answer is yes. We must create yes situations. So how do we do that? Oh, James Cohen's research was called Lending a Helping Hand. So how do we create yes situations? How do we turn off the fear response? Well, I've got good news for you, and I've got bad news for you. I'm going to give you the bad news first, because I like bad news first. I don't like the suspense of having to wait for it. This is the bad news. And it is bad. I have a smile on my face, but it is bad. I think I'm smiling because it's so bad. You cannot, at any level, lower your anxiety. You are completely unable to do that. You cannot do that. This is truly, truly, I'm telling you, a hopeless situation. That's the bad news. But there's good news. Here's the good news. We have a God who makes a way out of hopeless situations. Yes? And he's made a way out of this hopeless situation. He has. This is where it begins. We simply confess that we're unable to lower our own anxiety. And by confessing it, it means we acknowledge that we can't lower our own anxiety. We agree with that as reality. And when we can make that confession will bring us to the end of ourselves. See, we reach the end of ourselves when we can acknowledge our limitations, when we can acknowledge that we're unable to do that. And when we reach the end of ourselves, we can let go of self-reliance. And when we let go of self-reliance, we can truly rely on God. We can truly rely on others, our close circle of loved ones. And here's the good news. They can do what we cannot do, right? They can do what we cannot do. That's the good news. And so when you reach the end of yourselves, you position yourself for the good news. And that's what that confession does. It takes you to the end of yourself so you can truly lean on God and lean on your close circle of loved ones. And then the second thing is to share your anxiety. Peter says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. This is a great verse because it doesn't just tell us don't be anxious. It tells us what to do with our anxiety, right? As a psychologist, I like that. Cast it, to share it. And we are designed to share each other's anxiety. Here's some more neuroscience. This one's my favorite one. Okay, so researchers took 2 people at a time into a laboratory. They attached electrodes to the back of the hand. The back of the hand is a little bit more sensitive, so you don't need as much electricity to get the desired discomfort, so it's safer. It's safer. At least that's what they tell the ethics committee. They stick one person into the MRI machine, and they shock them, and they look at what their brain does. And what do they find? The pain centers light up, which is not a big finding. You inflict somebody with pain, the pain centers will register that pain. So then they remove the electrodes, and they say, okay, no more shock. But we want you to watch while we shock this other person. And we want to see what your brain does when you witness another human being in pain. And this is when it gets interesting. This is what they found. The same pain centers that lit up when that individual was shocked also lit up when that individual watched somebody else get shocked. The brain couldn't tell the difference between its own pain and somebody else's pain. The brain was literally sharing the other person's pain. And that is a remarkable study because it demonstrates that we are relational at a cellular level. There are cells in your head that are called neurons, and there are specific neurons that are called mirror neurons, and those mirror neurons are responsible for sharing other people's pain, struggles, anxieties, worry, and they're responsible for mourning with those who mourn. It's amazing. It demonstrates that we are relational from the head to the toe, inside and out. It's unbelievable. Why are we wired this way? Why is the brain wired this way? Well, I think it's because God does not want us to suffer alone. And if we have to suffer, and on this planet we have to suffer, if we have to suffer, He wants us to suffer surrounded by the people that love us, surrounded by the people who care for us, and He wants our pain and suffering to be shared. See, we all have baggage, and it's important that we can share that baggage and have others carry it with us. This is a funny picture of George Bush, but he's sharing that child's emotional distress. His brain is mirroring that child's emotional state, right? And you know, if you've done any kind of counseling, I'm assuming most of you have, that you sit down with an individual or couple or family in crisis, you will end that session exhausted. Because you've been sharing their crisis. Yeah? You've been sharing it with them. Okay, how do we get concrete? How do we do this? How do we share our anxiety? Well, I want to talk to you about a concept called confident honesty. And confident honesty is what turns anxiety into an experience of love. So let me parse this. By confident, I do not mean self-confident. Building yourself up, becoming a bigger person will not help you share your anxiety. Nor will it reduce your anxiety. It won't. You have to develop confidence in others. You have to develop confidence in God, confidence in your close circle of loved ones. And you have to develop confidence that God is for you. He's really there. He really cares. He is responsive. That the people in your circle, that they care for you. They're for you, not against you. You can count on them. You can rely on them. And when you become confident in their love for you, that confidence enables you to turn towards them and to share in an open and honest way, without defensiveness and without lots of embarrassment or shame. The more confident you are in their love for you, the more you're able to turn towards them and share your anxieties, your struggles, your fears, which gives them the opportunity to comfort you, to reassure you where you really, really need it and where it counts the most. Perspective. Have you ever noticed that when we get really, really anxious, we lose perspective? And you've probably also noticed that it only takes a tiny, tiny change in perspective to make enormous mountains of anxiety go away. And this is what I've also learned. If I lose perspective, I'll look for it inside, but if I don't find it there, I won't waste my time continuing to look there. Instead, I'll look outside of myself, in my relationships, with God, with my close circle, and maybe God will bring a verse to me that I've forgotten, and it speaks to me. And it changes my perspective. I remember Dad talking about some of his dark nights when he was battling cancer. He said that God just gave him music. He heard music in his head. And that music changed his state of mind, and it got him through dark nights. Or maybe it's somebody in your close circle. They make an observation that you haven't made. Or they just give you a little bit of wisdom, and it changes your mental set, and it changes your perspective. So if you lose perspective, look for it inside. But if you don't find it there, don't waste a lot of time looking for it there. Look outside of yourself in your relationships. Okay, what's the goal? The goal is not to live without anxiety, but the goal is to turn anxiety into an experience where you're loved. And that happens by giving up self-reliance. Don't try to deal with the anxiety on your own. Turn to God, lean on your close circle of loved ones. Build confidence in their love for you, in their care for you, and that will strengthen you and give you the courage to share openly and honestly your anxieties, your fears, which gives them the chance to comfort you, to care for you, to give you perspective, to give you wisdom, and that will downregulate the anxiety. Now, there are times where our close circle of loved ones, they're simply not enough, and we need more, and we need to go to a professional. But the process is exactly the same. You go to the counselor's office. You're giving up self-reliance. You're building confidence in that counselor, confidence that they care for you, that they know what they're doing, that they're competent. And as you become confident in them, you begin to share more and reveal more, which gives them the chance to comfort you, to encourage you, and to help you understand what your anxiety is all about. Same process, just different level of antibiotic, different dosage. That's anxiety. Let's turn the corner just a little bit. We don't have to turn it very much because anxiety and anger are very close neighbors. They overlap in many ways. And when you get really, really, really angry, it can cause you to feel anxious. And when you're really, really anxious, it can cause you to be irritable and prone to outbursts of anger. Anger is effective when it has a purpose. When anger loses its purpose and loses its focus, it causes us problems. Unfocused anger speeds up conversations and makes them explosive. And when conversations speed up and become explosive, we lose control. We stop thinking. We become impulsive, and that's when we do stupid things. So we must give anger a purpose, and we must know what the purpose of anger is. And what I want to do is I want to give you a relational model of anger. And from a relational standpoint, the purpose of anger is to protest disconnection in the relationship. And when somebody does something to you that causes you to feel more alone in the relationship than you're comfortable with, you're designed to say, stop, knock it off. I don't like that. It's not good for me to be alone, right? God told us that. And so anger is designed to discourage behaviors that would endanger the relationship. And so from a big picture standpoint, anger is nothing more than a signal that draws your attention to a deeper relational problem, that there's some sort of disconnection in the relationship. There's some sort of alienation that needs attention. Now, a non-relational model of anger says that anger is a feeling inside of you. Anger is an emotion inside of you. That's a one-person model. That's a non-relational model. A relational model of anger says this. Anger is a picture of an interaction. It's a scene in which you are doing something to another person. Maybe you're staring them down. Maybe you're clenching your fist. Maybe you're startling them with a loud noise. Maybe you're raising your voice. Maybe you're yelling at them, breaking things. But it's a scene in which you are doing something to another person in order to get them to react to you, in order to get them to stop doing something to you that you don't like, that you find threatening. Maybe you're trying to get them to stop being hurtful or scary, or they're doing something shameful or shaming or embarrassing, and you're designed to say, stop, I don't like that. But here's the problem. Those behaviors, yelling, screaming, breaking, those behaviors, yes, they will effectively catch somebody's attention. They will effectively startle somebody. But beyond that, those behaviors are useless because they don't introduce resolution to the situation. They don't bring a solution. So we must go beyond startling somebody or beyond catching somebody's attention, and we have to introduce resolution to the situation. And if we understand anger to be a signal that draws our attention to some sort of disconnection in the relationship, then resolution involves the repair of that disconnection. And when that disconnection is repaired, the anger will drop of its own weight. There may be a cooling off period, but the anger as a signal will turn off. And the way we repair disconnection is by taking that anger, translating it into need, and sharing that need in a clear and direct way. And when that need is responded to, the disconnection is repaired. Now, that is a very abstract concept. So if you've been following me, it's a miracle. It is. It is a miracle. If pat yourself on the back or have somebody else pat you on the back, do something like that. So I want to give you a few examples of what I mean to make this clear to you. I'm just going to put all these up there for the sake of time. We have a lot of basic relational needs, and when these relational needs are threatened, it causes a disconnection in the relationship. I need to be able to rely on you. We need to be able to rely on each other. That is a fundamental relational need. If I'm relying on you and you're suddenly not there for me, I'm going to feel alone in the relationship. That's disconnection. Sandy was in marketing, and she was assigned a new project, and she was given a coworker to work on the project. And she found herself getting more and more frustrated and angry with her coworker because her coworker came late to meetings, turned in work unfinished, so she had to do more of the work. And this went on and on and on, and she got more and more angry, and she got to the point that she didn't want to work on the project. She didn't like her coworker. She didn't want to work with her coworker. But her anger wasn't the problem. Her anger was a problem that was drawing her attention to a deeper relational issue between her and her coworker. And the issue was that she was not able to rely on her coworker. And as a result, she was alone in the project. And she was overwhelmed by all the extra responsibilities because it was a two-person job, not a one-person job. So since she couldn't rely on her coworker, she was alone in the project and she was overwhelmed. There's the disconnection. And that gave rise to anger, and the anger was drawing her attention to that. And she had to take her anger, translate it into need, and share it in a clear and direct way. She had to sit down with her coworker and say, look, I need to be able to rely on you. When we have meetings, I need to know that you're going to be there on time. And when you turn in work, I need to know I can count on you, that that work will be done. I need to be able to depend on you, count on you, rely on you. And that's it. And she let her coworker respond. And fortunately for her, her coworker was a flake, but not irresponsible. And so her coworker could see the importance of becoming more reliable for the sake of the project. But because her coworker could respond to that need, that disconnection was repaired, right? I need to know that I matter to you. That is a fundamental relational need. We need to know that we matter to each other. If I turn to somebody that I love and I care for, and they treat me as though I don't matter to them, I'm going to feel alienated, I'm going to feel rejected, I'm going to feel alone. Disconnection. Kevin and Debbie, they've been together for a long time. And Debbie, she has severe ADHD with inattentive type. And Kevin can't stand it. He can't stand it because there are times where he'll bring a struggle to her or an important experience to her, and she'll get distracted and start a conversation with the kids or answer the phone if it rings or change the subject. And then he just blows up and he gets angry. He gets so angry with her. And then they just get into an ugly row. But his anger is not the problem. His anger is drawing his attention to a deeper problem that the two of them have. And the problem is this. Kevin, there are times where he'll bring a struggle in his heart to her, and then she'll turn away from him to start a conversation with the kids, or she'll turn away from him to pick up the phone if it rings. And when she turns away from him, it leaves him alone with his struggle. And it leaves him feeling as though what he's saying doesn't matter to her and that he doesn't matter to her. There's the breach. There's the disconnection. And that gives rise to anger. And he had to take his anger and translate it into need, which meant that he had to stop arguing about the distractibility. And he had to just sit down with Debbie and just say, hey, honey, I need to know that I matter to you. Because there are some times where I'm talking to you and you just leave the conversation. And I end up feeling like what I'm saying isn't important to you and that I'm not important to you. And I can't stand the way that feels. And for the first time, she could see this experience from his side of it, from his perspective. And she could take it serious. And she could respond to it and reassure him. And you know what? When she reassured him, he felt connected to her, and their bond was stronger. And from that place, when she was distracted, they could laugh at it because it was no longer a threat. Their bond was stronger. I'm not going to go through all of these. I need to feel secure in our relationship. That's another fundamental relational need. We need to feel secure with each other. A lot of arguments about finances have absolutely nothing to do with finances. Nothing to do with finances. You go a little bit deeper, and you see that there are arguments about power and control. Then you go a little bit deeper, and you see it's one person reaching out to the other to feel more secure. It's about security. See, money can symbolize a lot of things, but it most frequently symbolizes security. We call it financial security. So one person is seeing the bank account get lower and lower and lower, and they start to feel more and more insecure. And then they protest, stop spending money, because they're scared. They're insecure. They're getting more and more insecure. And so the goal is to help the spender see that non-spender's reach is for security. Not for power, not for control, but for security. And that changes the entire dynamic because we need to feel secure with each other. Okay. Goal. The goal is to see anger as a signal that draws your attention to a deeper relational problem. There's a disconnection. And the goal is to mend that disconnection by taking your anger, translating it into need, whatever you need. Do you need to know that person is reliable, that you can trust that person, you can depend on that person? Do you need to know that person trusts you? Do you need to know that you're safe with that person, that you're secure with that person, that person loves you? I don't know what you're going to need, but you have to figure out what you need from the person in order to feel like you're not alone in the relationship. What do you need to feel connected and close? Put your finger on that need and then share that need in a clear and direct way. And when that need is responded to, the relationship is repaired. And the anger will turn off as a signal. There'll be a cooling off period, but it'll turn off. Conclusion. Your brain is a social organ. You are wired to connect. You're wired to connect to other people. And when we are anxious, we are designed to seek relationship. We are designed to lean on God, lean on others. And those relationships are then designed to lower our anxiety. And when our relationships are threatened, we're designed to get angry and to protest that threat, say stop. Because relationships are utterly vital. They are so essential to who we are. We seek relationships and we protect them because they're so important. And relationships and love are centered in your brain, and everything else is neurologically wired around that. Relationship is essential. That's what the neuroscience of love is showing us. And so essentially what I've done is I've used anxiety and anger as an excuse to talk to you about relationships, because that's what it's all about. Your head is wired for relationships at every single level. And there's so many studies from neuroscience that I could talk to you about, but you have to trust me. You have to trust me. We are wired for relationships. That's all I have. I hope it helps, and I hope it helps you help others, and maybe there'll be a ripple effect. Let me pray for you. Jesus. 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 That's really all that needs to be said, because in your name, There's power, there's healing, there's love, there's salvation, there's grace, there's forgiveness, there's everything that we need and everything that we want. You are it, Jesus. You are it. And we just ask that you would help us approach your throne of grace with confidence so that we can turn to you and turn to your body, our close circle of loved ones, for the closeness, for the support, for the wisdom, for the encouragement, for the perspective that we need in those dark nights when we're worried and we can't sleep because our mind is racing. And Lord, show us how to protect our relationships and to guard them, because from those relationships we find life, we find health, and we find healing. And I pray this in your name. Amen.